Okay, we're going to start with chapter 9. This is the chapter that I picked to do my summary. It starts with the research of how victimology started in the 18th century and how it's still getting better through the 19th and 20th century. Next is physical harm. Victims experience physical and psychological reactions to sexual abuse. Most rape victims do not ever experience their offender using a lethal weapon. That's a huge relief off their shoulders for not being, that's really scary seeing a gun or a knife to your throat or your head or something. But don't get me wrong, the victims also go through having broken teeth, black eyes, bruises all over their body, broken bones, and etc. Those live with them forever, the physical harm. They might go away, but the trauma is still there with them. Children also that are victims of experience a long-term abuse go through sodomization, which is it allows the victims to experience emotional pain through their physical symptoms. Victims also go through having getting STDs and also go through pregnancies. There are different stages of victimizations. RTS details goes through the stages of victims that experience rape. The first stage is the acute phase. It's a short period after they are raped or physically abused, and their reactions are crying, swearing, very emotional distress. That's the first phase. The second phase is reorganizational phase, and they learn how to accept and cope with their life after the sexual abuse. Now, in this section, there are many different stages of sexual victimizations, just as there are many different researchers that come up with different stages that help victims in the long run. Next, the hospital is a key institution because it's the first place the victims go to after the abuse. They examine their bodies, they collect evidence, they make them feel safe, warm, and loved. Next is the police. Now, the police primary duties are to interview the victim, investigate the crime, and collect evidence. Now, police respond to victims in a different way. For instance, a prostitute and a victim that knows the rapist is not going to get as much sympathy as a stranger to their rapist or a child. Also, gender does matter. Males are not treated with as much sympathy than women are because they're a male. They're supposed to be strong, dominant. Nothing like that's supposed to happen to a male, but sometimes it does, and police don't always recognize it or take sympathy for it. But after all of this, it goes to either a dismissal, which is very hard on the victim. It goes to a plea bargain, or it goes to trial. Trial can sometimes be hard on the victim, but it also helps with their treatment. Seeing the rapist, going over what happened to them, it helps them a lot. But 90% of cases end up being in a plea bargain because prosecutors don't want their victims' rapists to go out free. They want them to get in trouble in some way because it's hard to collect evidence on rape. It really is. There are also rape shield laws that helped the victim in the long run. The defense is not allowed to bring up the character of the victim. It can slightly bring up the history of their sexual life, but not into detail whatsoever. Next, there's also treatment and counseling for victims. There are rape crisis centers all around the world in different countries that help victims by giving them information about police stations, courts, hospital, pregnancy, abortion, and STDs. Counseling helps victims understand the offense and helps them with their reactions and future offenses. Now, my position statement is going to go over the physiological reactions. Now, since I'm a psychology major, this is very important to me. Some people think that psychology is a joke and it's not that big of a deal, but some people do experience very traumatic life events after their trauma. For instance, juveniles experience a lot of traumatic emotional responses, mental health problems. They include fear, anxiety, depression. They can end up having a huge anxiety-related disorder. They can have an eating disorder. They can have a panic disorder. They can have issues with being in social interaction. They have a hard time keeping their weight normal. Could have sleeping disorders. There's so many different things that these victims go through that they do need help. There are psychological issues with trauma. There is. And post-traumatic stress disorder is a huge one, especially if one of the victims goes through like having a gun to your head, or having broken bones, or having bruises and teeth missing. It's very hard for them, especially if it's a family member. Victims also feel, very unpleasant telling their story. They feel embarrassed that something like that happened to them. I take a position on this, and I agree with the book that all these things do exist. But there are some people that don't agree. There are people who think that people deserved rape. And that also goes in back to chapter 1 with reporting, abuse. Reporting is very, very important, because all these things I went over in chapter 9 they wouldn't be able to go through or fix or know anything that could help them in the long run. They wouldn't know if they never reported it. They would never know they had STD. It would take them a while to figure out if they were pregnant. Their life could be put on a hold. They would never be able to feel, certain love by another person. They would be scared by someone's touch. So physiological reactions are true. They do happen, and getting medication or help is very important for it and dealing with your issues. All right, that's my position statement number 2 on chapter 9. Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed it.